Greetings. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth, peace to people of goodwill. So, this morning, Berean TV played a video which Jim Green had posted to Facebook. And in that video, some lay Catholics were seen lining up and taking turns hugging a statue of the Virgin Mary, which in turn led to a discussion about whether they were worshiping Mary. And being that I'm sort of like the resident Catholic among the regulars over at Berean TV, Berean invited me to come on to discuss the subject a bit, and I wound up joining the panel for about 20 minutes to get into some of the nuances. Now, the show overall is another one of those marathon lives, and it wound up spanning more than 8 hours. And so, being concerned that my brief contribution might get buried therein, I wanted to clip it up and show it on my own channel. So, without further ado, I'd like to share that portion now. Enjoy, feel free to share your thoughts, and God bless.
But let me do this first before Abu get out here. Shout out to Jim Green. He was on the other day, and where is that thing? Here you go. He was on the other day. I got this off of that's the first post when I opened up my Facebook this morning. That was the first. This is one of the first posts right here. I think underneath, I'm gonna have to go to this page. I think underneath his heading was Catholics, we don't worship Mary. Y'all know who Jim Green is. Y'all subscribe to this channel, check him out. Look at this. What's this? What's going on here, Abu? This is it right here. Catholics, this Jim Green right here, another apologist. Jim Green. Catholics, we don't worship Mary. And he has this here. And y'all see what's going on. Now, some would say that people are blowing just to blow. They're not worshiping Mary. Do the EO, do people have prayers to the dead? There's one mediator between God and man. I'm going to get into some other arguments, but a quick before Abu scurries back to work. No, I want to see what Abu got to say. Oh, good. But Jim Green says, he posted this, and Jim Green said that we do not worship Mary. Now, it's a statue in the front of a room. I guess those are long, old school pews, and people are online waiting to waiting to hug this statue that's covered up. A lot's happening out here, y'all. And then I'll go back and I'll look for Abu's comments specifically.
Ave Maria, Ave Maria. Maria plantou amor, colhendo os frutos, Jesus Salvador. Ave, Ave, Ave Maria. Ave Maria. O véu da esperança nos dá proteção. Te oferto, mãezinha do meu coração.
I'm going to read Abu right now. Alton, do you see? Type a one if y'all see. Andy, where red letter at? Do y'all see a problem with what's happening here? Do you know what's happening, or you know they hugging a statue, and that's devil worship? All right, y'all see that right now. Let me look at some of these comments. Abu say, honestly, goofy as that may look, if we got into the precise mechanics of what is going on out there, I suspect the charges of worship would break down. So this is so Abu saying this is not they're not really worshiping Mary. Am I hearing you correctly? In other words, I'm gonna go down, I'm gonna read some more things. Okay, this is Alton's comment on that. He is also apologizing. Jim Green not playing with no Catholics, period. Alton says, no comment. Me and Abu, or Abu and I, are going to have a discussion soon. And discussions are important to have, and we're seeing more and more discussions taking place. A lot of people feel that their other side or their position has largely been misrepresented. Everybody want to do what's right for the other side, or that's what they claim, and they want to make sure they're representing their position fairly. I'm going to show you some other things, but let me go down here. This is this a question or he? No, there's no question mark back there. Red letter said this is heresy hugging. This is heresy hugging. And then I guess he'll say that they're talking to dead people. Protestants, we believe, or people that follow more of that tradition would say there's one mediator between God and man. The only person you talking to is the Lord Jesus Christ. Some say, well, you're talking to the Father. How do we understand prayer? Jesus said, whatsoever I ask the Father, and whatsoever you ask the Father in my name, that will I do, that the Father might be glorified. I think some people don't even know who they're praying to. He said, yes, that's very fair. This is what people are saying. Of course, Roger. Abu, when they are bowing down and praying to the statue, yes, it's a form of worship. I don't know what, they're just hugging the statue right here. Oh, I don't know what's going on. Maybe, matter of fact, maybe I can put the link out there if Abu would like to come on and share something. I know it's early. I don't put it. All right, Met said, worship has to be defined. Elder Joe, how do you define worship? Roger, how do you define worship? Red letter, thank you. Gabriel, red letter, how do you define worship? Where's Judarize at? Oh, you might be on the road. Go ahead, Abu. I'm going to mute myself.
Hey, good morning to everybody. Good morning to everybody. Sorry it took me so long to get on. I was having a little bit of technical difficulties. What I would say, and I wrote this in the chat. I don't know if it got pulled up because I was gone for a few minutes trying to log in. But what I would say is that worship is a matter of intention, not body position. So permit me to give two analogies to illustrate this. As I noted in the chat, in Joshua, in the 7th chapter of the book of Joshua, Joshua prostrates while facing the ark. So his body is prostrating. He's pointing towards the ark. There's statues on it. One could, if they saw him prostrating in the direction of statues, mistake that for worship. Think that he might be worshiping the statues, right? But they would be mistaken. Now, let's give a different analogy. Suppose someone is sitting in their cubicle in an office, let's say an office building in Manhattan. And let's say they're sitting quietly in their chair with their arms by their sides, and they're looking at their mug, their coffee mug. And silently in their mind, they're saying to the mug, you are my creator. You are the one that I worship, you alone. They're saying that to the mug. That person would be engaging in worship. And the point of that analogy is that worship is not a matter of body position. It's a matter of intention. So I'm not going to say none of those people there were engaging in worship. But the point is that once we get into the mechanics, something like hugging is not an act of worship. Facing a statue is not necessarily an act of worship, and so on down the line. Those are the preliminaries that I would lay out.
Elder Joe, the realness. Where Mac y'all at? You in the A? Do y'all understand what was just said? No one spoke to a body position, though. You focusing on that. Let's not play semantics.
So, but wait a minute. If Roger's saying no one spoke to a body position, then what is the implication that they're engaging in worship? If it's images, Roger has an image in his own, in his own, right next to his name, he has an image. And if he's going to say, well, but they're hugging the image or something like that, that's what gets into body position.
That's the image of him. You mean his avatar, whatever you call that thing up in there?
That's fine. So then what it would reach then is that having an image of something is not necessarily the worship of that thing. He's not engaging in self-worship. Yeah, you see that? Hugging is not an act of worship. Intention is important. I'm guessing they're paraphrasing me.
Yes. You're seeing, I don't know if he see.
He says, so you are assuming again, right? Well, I mean, I think what's happening is that the people who raised the charge of worship were engaging in assumptions based on body position, stuff like that. So I want to give another analogy that I gave in the chat. Suppose there's a woman who, she's a widow. She was married for 50 years. Her husband dies before her. And she takes the picture. She has a picture of her husband. If she hugged, say, a framed picture of her husband, or she picked it up off a shelf and kissed it, would she be worshiping her husband? I think the answer is, at the very least, not necessarily.
No, just in remembrance. Remember, what are they singing?
Ave
while
Maria. They were
scrolling.
singing Ave Maria, which I mean, I think they intended it in Spanish, but in Latin it means Hail Mary. It's directly out of the Vulgate reference of I think Luke 1:28.
It's out of the Bible. He's out of the Greek Bible. He's saying.
Yeah, it's almost literal. You know what's a fascinating thing about Ave? So it actually, that Latin phrase Ave, that Latin declaration, it comes from a Phoenician declaration, Hawe, right? Which is etymologically related to the name Eve, right? Hawa, and it literally means like life or live. So in a sense, for the ancient Romans, it was like saying long live. They got it from the Phoenicians to say Ave or Hawe, you know? It's like saying long live, you know, may you be granted long life, something like that.
Look at the screen.
Says, if Christ tells us not to make any graven images, then why would we be having a graven? So I would ask.
To some people, this is simple. This is simple. This is it's nonsense that we even got to speak on it to some in here. But go ahead.
So what I would say is, first, on the most superficial level, and we've done this before. We've literally done this before, where Red Letter would raise an objection against images, and I would say he has an image of an animal in his avatar, right? And so, but he might say, oh, but graven, maybe it means something like, you know, three-dimensional statues. Maybe he'll say that two-dimensional images are permissible. But this takes us back to the whole analogy with the Ark. The Ark had statues atop of it. And when you start getting into Solomon's temples, there were statues all over there. So
wait a minute. That's important, Red Letter. You Israel, Solomon's temple means something. You believe that come from the everlasting spirit, the great God. And y'all believe that's the same one that Adam and Eve had a relationship with, and they disobeyed him. The true spirit of the universe told them, and Most Excellent is saying, God told them to make several images. Where the mother folk that's in here talking right now? God told them to make several images in the temple. Was that temple devil worship? And they're trying to compare it. Come on, I see Israelites in here. Let's talk right now.
Now, you notice Roger Sherman wrote Roger Sherman, who said that it was a bad assumption to think this is about body position. He writes in the chat, he says, is Red Letter bowing down and kissing that image of a gorilla? Well, here's the thing. That precisely now it becomes an issue of body position, which is a moment ago Roger Sherman insinuated was not the issue here. So if it's an issue of body position, that takes us back to the question, is hugging something necessarily worship? If I hug my kids, am I worshiping them? If Jim Green hugs his kids, is he worshiping them? If a widow hugs a picture of her deceased husband, is she worshiping him? You know, some graves have pictures on them. Like, you know, there's someone passed away, they'll sort of have a picture of the deceased in the grave. If a widow goes and visits the grave of her deceased husband and says, oh, Harold, I miss you so much, and kisses the gravestone, is she worshiping her husband? I think it should be clear that worship is a matter of intention, not
so
body
Catholics. Red Letter ain't going for none of this. He said this is pure semantic deception. So
right.
you're saying right now, Catholics, maybe some not knowingly, Catholics do not intend for no one to worship Mary or to give prayers.
Well, it certainly
or
shouldn't. I think
Mary.
there's lay Catholics who might sink into that. I mean, I've you know, well, I don't think they're rightly Catholics at that point. But yeah, what I'm saying is that you don't demonstrate that they're engaging in worship by saying, oh, look, they hugged the statue or something like that, you know? And the thing now, what you see here is this charge of semantics.
This ain't nothing but the appearance of evil. This is evil, and y'all trying to clean it and make it something godly, and it's evil and wicked.
I have to say,
I added those words in there. I'm sorry, y'all.
No problem. I understand. I appreciate it. Going back to the first comment that got put up from me, I would say that what we're seeing immediately, and if I'm not mistaken, I've only been on a few minutes.
Yes.
The charge, once we got into the precise mechanics, the charge of worship started to break down, which is precisely what I predicted and what's happening fairly quickly. You know.
What do you read? Most Excellent. Tell me, what do you mean? What is worship?
I told y'all worship, forgive me, I'm reading this on my phone. He says, I told y'all worship has to be defined. The way some of you guys define it would mean you're worshiping a whole myriad of things. Exactly. That's the whole thing. We got to get into the precise mechanics of worship, what constitutes worship. And I think if we're consistent, things are either going to break down or, you know. So
who agrees with
the heart, not the body? I agree with
lyrically outspoken.
Yeah,
lyrically outspoken says that it's the posture of the heart, not the body.
Exactly. That's why I gave the analogy. Imagine someone sitting at their desk in their cubicle at their job in an office building in Manhattan. If they're just sitting there quietly, you wouldn't think they're engaging in worship. But if they're silently saying in their mind to their coffee mug, "You are my creator, you do I worship," that person is worshiping that mug. Has nothing to do with their body position. It has to do with, like he said, it has to do with their heart. It has to do with their mind. It has to do with their intentions.
You see?
And again, I would say this. So Red Letter asks, if I have a statue and I'm singing Hail Mary and I'm hugging the statue, would that not be worship? What I would say is, this takes us back to the question, which part of that, if we get into the precise mechanics, which part of that constitutes worship? Is it hugging the worship? Is it talking worship? You know, what is it? I think ultimately it's going to come down to intention. It says, where is Mary placed in liturgy by the apostles?
Excellent question. Excellent question. Darrell is sick of y'all. Coming around here every day.
I mean, if the Bible's part of the liturgy, she's mentioned quite a few times in the liturgy. It depends on what we mean by liturgy and what we mean by the apostles. But
well, explain that because 512 said Abu dodging bullets like Neo in the Matrix. Like you dodging stuff. You know what this is. He said, "Thou shalt not bow down to them." These folks sick of y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. Where do you see the apostles? The apostles.
No, I answer that question. If much of Catholic devotion to Mary does not seem to have any explicit reference in the Bible, I'd be the first to say that.
Oh,
but I would say there's implicit stuff in there.
Wait a minute, y'all. He said, "I'll be the first to say that." Let's see what comes now, Red Letter. Go ahead now. You'll be. He already admitted that, so it's no beef right. It's no beef right there. Let me call that.
But again, there's two different questions there. So, like, it takes us back to this example of, like, remember I gave the example of because I feel like we're swaying into another topic. Like, I gave the example of a widow who has a picture of her husband, and let's say a framed picture on a mantle, her deceased husband. If she hugs it and kisses that picture, is she worshiping her husband? I think we could all say no, not necessarily. But if someone says, when did the apostles ever hug a picture of her husband? That's a completely different question, you know?
Let me ask you a question. You see Mary in that, let's say that is an image of Mary. If you see an image of Mary like that, what would you equate that to in the Temple of Solomon?
Well, I mean, so I think the attitudes towards the statues would be different, but in terms of in this Temple of Solomon, there were giant statues of cherubim, and then there were smaller carved images of like lions and bulls and stuff like that. So in a sense, there were, images in every direction you looked in Solomon's temple. So it's not the images per se. One thing I would say, John Henry Newman had an interesting observation that he made back in the 1800s. For those who don't know, John Henry Newman was an Anglican who converted to Catholicism in the 19th century. And he had pointed out that even in his day, it was common. It's probably been common long before his day, and it's certainly common to this day, that you can show disrespect to individuals by burning them in effigy. Like, for example, in Washington, D.C., this past couple days, someone might have had a picture of the prime minister of the modern secular state that's called Israel, and they might have burned an image of Netanyahu, intending to transmit disrespect to him by disrespecting his image. And so John Henry Newman noted that, there were Protestants who would like burn the Pope in effigy and stuff like that. And he would say, if you can transmit disrespect to a person through an image, why can't you transmit honor or respect through an image?
Okay, y'all hear that? Listen to the Seminary Cove is making a statement. Listen to this. Israelites, y'all worship that tree. Christians, bowing before the tree isn't worship. Same. Christians bowing down to the statue is worship. How does that work? Do y'all see what's going on here?
Jesuit Covey.
Do y'all see what's happening here? What people are saying about the arguments and using the same arguments and flipping them? My man would hit my jack talking about we feeding the awakening. I'm like, what the Father God are these people talking about? But I gotta say, if not feeding awakening, maybe a lot of people are using some of the same points that we said the Israelites would use, and we would say it's silly. Then we'll turn around and flip and use it on somebody else, like a Catholic.
Berean, can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
This is separate from the Catholic argument, but I would be sincerely interested in your sincere answer. And just to make sure that we're clear that this is not a gotcha question, if you ask me this question, I would say no. I would say no. So here's my question. Do you believe sincerely whether or not when Orthodox Muslims go to Mecca prostrate in the direction of the Kaaba, and even kiss part of it, do you believe they're worshiping the Kaaba itself?
No, but I like to hit them with that rock worship though. I have done it before.
Right, it's fun to do the polemic.
Yes,
but
I like to do yes, but no.
And honest,
I don't really think they think that rock is Allah.
Yeah, exactly. I agree 100%. And then therefore that would mean prostrating towards an object, kissing that object does not necessarily constitute worship, which takes us back to the point, as I think it was lyrically outspoken, who said it's not the position of the body, but rather the position of the heart.
But all the scriptures that talk about idols, how would you answer that? How would you answer? You're dodging. How would you answer? How would you answer like what Red Letter said?
Okay, so for example,
deception. It's not really worship, and it's the direction and all of that stuff. Why we need Mary? Alton, you heard what I just asked him, Alton.
Why would we need Mary? I mean, that's, I think, a different question. Like whether something is permissible and whether it's needed are two different questions. So, for example, like if you gave this analogy, if I were to say to you, Berean, I'm having a hard time, can you keep me in your prayers?
Yes.
Someone could rightly ask, why do you need Berean to pray for
you?
Like you're not going to be saved. The Berean doesn't pray for you. Is that no? I'm not saying that, right? I don't like in an extremely strict definition of need. We could say, okay, maybe I don't quote unquote need Berean to pray for me, but that doesn't mean it's impermissible. So that's the first thing I would note. There's a difference between why do you need something and is something permissible. That's the point of that analogy. Regarding scriptures on idol worship, I think one interesting topic is specifically the 10 Commandments and this claim that's been around for centuries that Catholics have removed the second commandment and this kind of thing. I think when you look at, for example, how even rabbinic Jews divide up the commandments, the part that talks about images falls within the same commandment as not having other gods. So that relates directly to why isn't it a contradiction for the Bible to say in Exodus 20, don't have these images, don't make graven images. And yet on another place, God is commanding people to make images, like images of the cherubim and stuff like that. Why isn't that a contradiction?
And y'all have to admit, some of y'all have to admit that they did have images in the temple. Why would God say don't? Red Letter would say.
Well, here's the answer. I think the answer is that commandment, in the 10 Commandments, when it's talking about images, I think both the Catholics and the rabbinic Jews and Luther himself agreed with this division. They have it right that it falls together with the commandment about not having other gods. The prohibition isn't on having images. The prohibition is on using such for the worship of other gods.
Okay.
So, for example, if you and I are good friends and I have a picture of you and I keep it in my home, I don't think that's worship. But if I'm saying, well, that's actually Krishna reincarnated, and then we bow to that statue, to a picture of you as Krishna reincarnated or something like that, and declare that you're the creator of the universe and all that, Krishna through you. I mean, that would be worship. You understand?
I'll put the link out there if you want to jump on Roger or Red Letter to question about anybody on this subject.
Yeah, I'm going to go.
Elder Joe, you going for this? You don't have too much time. Elder Joe, are you going for this? Do you understand it? Let me see. Hold on. I gotta take care. Let me just. Do you see anything else in the comment section?
I mean, no, I'm on my phone. I think when I'm attempting to look at the comments, I'm at risk of losing.
Okay. Hold on.
Sorry about that.
Okay. All right. He said, Red Letter said that was only done once. You can't use that because that crap's going on now wasn't given to us by God.
Wait, what was only done once? Images was only done once? Like, because I mean, there's the statues on top of the ark. There's the statues inside the temple. There's even the bronze serpent. There's lots of images. There's lots of three-dimensional images.
What's the official Catholic position on there? Do the Catholic Church view it as just permissible, or are they dogmatic about it with the Mary? Can you be a good Roman Catholic without saying any praise to Mary at all?
Yeah, I think so.
When you say the mother of God, oh boy, I don't even want to start Alton.
I would think so. I mean, obviously, there's people who would interpret certain statements as disagreeing with me here. I think you could be a good Catholic who doesn't necessarily petition Mary, right? But I think from the Catholic perspective, where things fall apart vis-a-vis being a good Catholic is if you polemicize against it. It's one thing to not petition Mary. It's another thing to say those who petition Mary are going to hell. They're idolaters, blah, blah, blah. When you start doing that, I think from a Catholic perspective, that's when it's a problem, Okay,
so no real Catholic would speak against it.
Well, I would just say, yeah, from the Catholic perspective, that's when things break down.
Let me see. Go ahead. Who's typing? Who bowed down and kissed the statue in the temple?
Well,
You
I mean,
said
off
you
the
can't
top of my
compare
head.
that nowhere into Solomon's temple, nowhere.
So, right, I agree that we don't have an explicit reference to that, but what we're circling back to now is the question of whether you infer worship from body position, you know, and I think we already covered that that's not the case. So, for you know what I mean? So, I mean, there's a text where Solomon bows towards his mother, if I'm not mistaken, you know, but I don't think he's worshiping her. And I bet Solomon kissed his mother as well.
So having a black picture of Jesus is not wrong.
100%. 100%, Terrence Jones. And I would like to invite you to certain Catholic churches that have very dark images of Jesus. The Catholic Church is the greatest preserver of dark images of Jesus Christ. The greatest preserver. And we build the biggest churches dedicated to dark images. That's the Catholic Church.
Uh-oh. All right, boy. Don't look like nobody want to jump on and deal with that.
Yeah, I got because I got to run anyway. I thank you for
okay,
having me
all right. Appreciate you. All right, y'all heard that now. Y'all heard it now. Because you heard that and we're having these discussions, don't try to make this a Catholic channel. That's when you start doing silly stuff. We trying to be grown and have grown folk discussion, which a lot of people can't handle, a lot of people don't like. Now, type a one if you think that was nonsense. Red letter, Elder Joe, I want to hear if that was not pure nonsense and y'all don't accept a near bit of it. I'm going to take y'all somewhere else. I'm going to give y'all a commercial break first.